See more 623 species in genus Philodendron at monsteraholic.com. How to care for Philodendron Squamiferum. The Philodendron Squamiferum, with its bold and unique foliage, is a popular houseplant. Here's a guide on how to care for it. Light. Philodendron Squamiferum thrives in bright, indirect light. Avoid harsh direct sunlight, which can scorch the leaves. East or north-facing windows are ideal placements. If placing it near a south-facing window, provide some afternoon shade with sheer curtains or by moving the plant further from the window. Watering. This philodendron prefers consistent moisture but dislikes sitting in waterlogged soil. Allow the top inch of the soil to dry out completely before watering again. Sticking your finger into the soil is a good way to check moisture levels. Water thoroughly until water runs out of the drainage holes. Discard any excess water collected in the saucer to prevent root rot. Soil. Plant your Philodendron Squamiferum in a well-draining, rich, and organic potting mix. Aroid mix, specifically formulated for aroids like philodendrons, is a great option. You can also create your own mix using a combination of potting soil, perlite, for drainage and aeration, orchid bark, for additional drainage and air circulation. Temperature and humidity. Maintain warm temperatures between 65 degrees Fahrenheit and 85 degrees Fahrenheit, 18 degrees Celsius and 29 degrees Celsius. Protect your philodendron from cold drafts and sudden temperature drops. Aim for moderate to high humidity levels, around 50% or above. Here are ways to increase humidity. Group your philodendron with other humidity-loving plants. Use a pebble tray filled with water, avoid letting the pot sit in water. Use a humidifier to increase the overall humidity in the room. Fertilizing. During the growing season, spring and summer, you can fertilize your Philodendron Squamiferum monthly with a diluted, balanced liquid fertilizer. A balanced fertilizer formulated for houseplants works well. Reduce or withhold fertilizer during the winter months when the plant's growth slows down. Additional tips. Wiping leaves. Gently wipe the leaves with a damp cloth from time to time to remove dust and improve their ability to absorb light for photosynthesis. You can also mist the plant occasionally, but be mindful not to over-mist, as this can promote fungal diseases. Climbing habit. Philodendron Squamiferum is a climber in its natural habitat. You can provide a moss pole or another support structure for it to climb on, which will encourage aerial root growth and a fuller appearance. Repotting. Repot your Philodendron Squamiferum every 1 to 2 years when it outgrows its current pot. Choose a pot with drainage holes that is slightly larger than the previous one. Pests and diseases. Philodendron Squamiferum is generally pest and disease resistant, but watch out for common houseplant problems like mealybugs and spider mites. You can treat them with insecticidal soap or neem oil. How to propagate Philodendron Squamiferum. Philodendron Squamiferum can be propagated successfully through stem cuttings. Here's a guide to get you started. Materials. Sharp, sterile pruning shears or secateur. Potting mix suitable for aroids, well-draining, rich, and organic. Pot with drainage holes, size appropriate for the cutting. Transparent container or plastic bag, optional, for humidity. Steps. Selecting a stem cutting, choose a healthy, mature stem with at least 2 to 3 nodes, the bump where leaves and aerial roots emerge. Ideally, the cutting should be 3 to 5 inches long. Making the cut. Using your sterilized pruners, make a clean cut just below a node. You can also include an additional node at the top of the cutting, depending on your preference. Prepare the cutting. Optional, some growers recommend removing the lower leaves from the cutting, leaving just 2 to 3 leaves at the top. This allows the plant to focus its energy on root growth. Planting the cutting. Fill your pot with the well-draining potting mix. Make a hole in the center of the mix deep enough to accommodate at least one node of the cutting. Gently insert the stem cutting into the hole, ensuring at least one node is buried in the soil. Firm the soil gently around the base of the cutting. Watering. Water the potting mix thoroughly until water runs out of the drainage holes. Discard any excess water collected in the saucer. Humidity and light. Maintaining high humidity is crucial for successful propagation. You can achieve this by Placing the pot in a clear container or plastic bag, with a few ventilation holes, to create a mini greenhouse environment. Using a pebble tray filled with water, avoid letting the pot sit in water. Grouping the propagating pot with other houseplants to benefit from their combined humidity. Using a humidifier to increase the overall humidity in the room. Aftercare. Keep the potting mix consistently moist but not soggy. Place the pot in a warm location with bright, indirect light. Avoid direct sunlight. Be patient. Root development can take several weeks. You can gently tug on the cutting after a few weeks to check for resistance, which indicates root growth. Optional, weaning off humidity. Once new growth appears on the cutting, you can gradually introduce it to lower humidity by slowly increasing air ventilation around the pot, like opening the plastic bag for short periods. Once the Philodendron Squamiferum cutting has established a healthy root system, you can remove it from the propagating container and care for it like a mature philodendron. Additional tips. You can propagate Philodendron Squamiferum in water instead of soil. Follow the same steps for selecting and preparing the cutting. Place the bottom node of the cutting in a glass of clean water and ensure the node remains submerged. Change the water every few days to prevent bacteria growth. Roots should develop within a few weeks, and once established, you can transfer the cutting to a pot with well-draining soil. When propagating multiple cuttings, you can plant them together in a pot for a fuller appearance from the beginning. Is Philodendron Squamiferum rare? Yes, Philodendron Squamiferum is considered relatively rare. Here's a breakdown of its rarity. In the wild, Philodendron Squamiferum is a relatively rare plant in its natural habitat of French Guiana, Suriname, and northern Brazil. Houseplant market. While not the rarest philodendron variety, it's not as common as some more readily available houseplants. You'll likely find it at specialist suppliers or online retailers focusing on uncommon aroids rather than your typical garden center. Price. Due to its relative rarity, Philodendron Squamiferum tends to be more expensive than common philodendron varieties. Here's a comparison to give you an idea. Common philodendron varieties like Philodendron bipenifolium or Philodendron hederaceum can be easily found in most nurseries and garden centers at affordable prices. Philodendron Squamiferum, due to its unique features and limited availability, is more likely to be found at specialized plant shops or online retailers at a higher price point. Philodendron Squamiferum versus Florida Ghost. My Philodendron Squamiferum is like a hairy rockstar with its fuzzy red petioles and dramatically lobed leaves. It's a slow grower compared to my Philodendron Florida Ghost, but it makes up for it with the unique texture and eye-catching color. Watering it can be tricky. Those fuzzy stems seem to hold on to moisture for a bit longer, so I have to be careful not to overwater. Philodendron Squamiferum versus Florida Green. While the Squamiferum is all about drama, the Florida Green is the dependable friend. Its deep green, glossy leaves are constantly putting out new growth, making it a lush and vibrant addition to my plant shelf. It doesn't have the same textural interest as the Squamiferum, but the ease of care definitely makes up for it. I can pretty much water it on autopilot and it thrives. Philodendron Squamiferum versus Pedatum. At first glance, the Squamiferum and Pedatum can look similar with their deeply lobed leaves. But get up close, and that's where things differ. Philodendron Pedatum has smooth, almost waxy petioles, while the Squamiferum is all about the fuzzy texture. The Pedatum also seems to climb more readily, whereas my Squamiferum prefers to sprawl out. They both have their own charm, but for me, the Squamiferum wins with its fuzzy flair. Philodendron Squamiferum versus Squamicol. This is where things get interesting. Both the Squamiferum and Squamicol have fuzzy petioles, but that's where the similarities end. The Squamicol's leaves are much smaller and more rounded compared to the dramatic lobes of the Squamiferum. The Squamicol also tends to be a climber, whereas my Squamiferum is more of a sprawler. While I love the fuzziness of both, the Squamiferum's larger, more dramatic leaves make it a better fit for my hanging basket. So, while Philodendron Squamiferum isn't the rarest plant out there, it's definitely not as common as some houseplants, and if you're looking for one, you'll need to put in a bit more effort to find it. However, its beautiful foliage and interesting features make it a prized possession for many plant collectors.